Marcus Thompson, 42, a civil engineer on disability retirement. That's my life summed up in a cold, technical sentence, but the reality is way more complex than any report I've ever written. Today I'm going to tell a story that completely changed my perception of myself, of desire, and of the limits we believe are insurmountable. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, hit the like button and subscribe. This story will show you how one moment can change everything. The accident on the construction site happened 3 years ago. A poorly secured steel beam fell and crushed my right leg, along with my career and apparently my masculinity in the eyes of my wife, Sarah. What started as support and understanding turned into silent resentment. Sarah lost her job as a sales manager 6 months after my accident, and that's when drinking went from being a social thing to a daily escape from our financial and emotional reality. Our house in Denver, a red brick 2-story we bought full of dreams 10 years ago, now feels more like a well-decorated prison. The front yard, which I used to keep immaculate, started to show signs of neglect, a few stubborn weeds sprouting between the paving stones, the grass slightly longer than the neighborhood standard. Inside, the situation was even more bleak. What you're hearing here is just the beginning. The full stories, unfiltered and with all the details you can imagine, are available now. Check the link in the description right now. I wake up every day at 6 in the morning, not by choice, but because my body has developed this internal clock that can no longer sleep past that time. The first sound I hear is Sarah's irregular snoring coming from the living room, where she invariably passes out watching reruns of old sitcoms. The lingering smell of vodka mixed with the artificial scent of the lavender air freshener creates a nauseating combination that has become the signature fragrance of our home. My routine is mathematically precise, like everything I learned to do in engineering. I go down the stairs, avoiding the 2 steps that creak the 5th and the 11th, so as not to wake Sarah. In the kitchen, I make coffee strong enough to wake the dead, but which apparently has no effect on my wife. I check to see if she's still breathing, a morbid habit I developed after finding her once completely motionless on the sofa, her face bluish. That day, I thought I had finally lost the only person left in my family. The garage has become my sanctuary. I've turned half the space into a makeshift workshop where I work on small woodworking projects. It's not for the money my disability pension covers our basic needs, but for my sanity. There's something therapeutic about taking a rough piece of wood and turning it into something useful and beautiful. My hands, which once calculated structural loads and material resistance, have now specialized in delicate carvings and perfect joints. The afternoons are filled with household chores that Sarah can no longer manage. Washing dishes, organizing bills, grocery shopping at the store where all the employees already know me and give me that pitying look when they see me alone again. I prepare elaborate meals that I eat alone, while Sarah remains unconscious on her synthetic leather throne, surrounded by empty bottles and frozen food wrappers. The nights are the worst part. I sit in the armchair in the living room, pretending to watch engineering documentaries or history shows on the Discovery Channel, but really, I'm watching Sarah sleep fitfully in her alcoholic stupor. Sometimes she mutters incomprehensible words. Other times, she cries in her sleep. On rare occasions, she wakes up briefly, looks at me with glazed eyes, and asks who I am. It was in this numbing routine that Tyler showed up. One Thursday in June, I was in the garage sanding a picture frame. I was making a project with no specific recipient, just to keep my hands busy, when I heard the sound of an unfamiliar car pulling into the driveway. Through the dusty glass of the garage door, I saw a tall male silhouette getting out of a well-used black Honda Civic. My first thought was that it was some salesman or a religious missionary, but something in the figure's confident posture made me hesitate. I opened the garage door and almost didn't recognize the young man standing in my driveway. Tyler Bennett, Sarah's son from a previous relationship, whom I'd known since he was 15. But the shy, skinny teenager who had said goodbye to us 2 years ago to study mechanical engineering at the University of Colorado had transformed into something completely different. The first detail that caught my attention was his muscles. Tyler had always been tall. He got that from his biological father, but now his shoulders completely filled out the black t-shirt he was wearing. Tribal tattoos ran down his defined arms, ending at his wrists. His brown hair was cut in a modern style, with the sides shaved and the top longer. But it was his eyes that surprised me the most, still green like Sarah's, but with an intensity and confidence that weren't there before. "Marcus," he said, and even his voice had changed. Deeper, more confident. Surprise. My first reaction was genuine joy. Tyler had always been a smart and respectful kid, and during his high school years, we had developed a friendly relationship. He would help me with small projects around the house, and I would help him with math and physics. When he left for college, I missed our conversations about engineering and the times we worked together in the workshop. Tyler, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you until July. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to greet him. When we hugged, I felt the solidity of his body, the smell of men's soap mixed with something I couldn't immediately identify, maybe confidence, if confidence had a scent. Change of plans, he said, grabbing a large backpack and a suitcase from the trunk. I ran into some money problems at college. Decided to come back early and find a summer job here in Denver. I helped him with his luggage as we walked towards the house. Your mom will be happy to see you, I lied, knowing that Sarah probably wouldn't even notice his presence for the next few days. How is she? Tyler asked, and I could hear a tension in his voice that wasn't there when we were just a stepfather and stepson talking about trivial things. She's going through a tough time, I answered, choosing my words carefully. Tyler wasn't home when Sarah's alcoholism got worse, and I didn't know exactly how to bring it up. We entered through the front door, and the house's characteristic smell, alcohol, old air conditioning, and despair greeted us. Sarah was in her usual position on the sofa, a half-empty bottle of vodka on the coffee table, sleeping with the TV on at a low volume. Tyler stopped in his tracks when he saw her. Jesus Christ, he muttered, and I realized he was no longer the teenager who had left this house. His eyes scanned the scene with a maturity that surprised me. How long has she been like this? It's gotten much worse in the last year, I admitted, feeling strangely vulnerable admitting this to him. Some days are better than others, but Tyler walked over to the sofa and watched Sarah sleep. She was wearing the same clothes as yesterday, an oversized stained t-shirt and pajama shorts. Her hair, once always well kept, was greasy and messy. Tyler reached out and gently moved a strand of her hair away from her face. She needs professional help, he said without looking at me. She refuses to get treatment, says she can stop whenever she wants. Tyler finally turned to me, and I saw something in his eyes that made me swallow hard. It wasn't just filial concern, it was mature understanding, genuine empathy, and something else I couldn't immediately identify. And you? How are you handling all this? The question caught me off guard. No one had asked me how I was handling the situation. Friends had gradually drifted away, embarrassed by Sarah's situation. My family lived in other states, and our contact was limited to occasional calls where I'd lie about how everything was fine. I'm dealing with it, I replied, but even to my own ears, the answer sounded weak. Tyler studied me for a moment that seemed to last much longer than it actually did. Then, to my surprise, he placed a hand on my shoulder. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone. I felt something stir in my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. It was recognition, validation, the feeling of being seen by another human being. But there was something more, something that made me slightly uncomfortable with the physical closeness and the intensity of his gaze. Let's get your things to your room, I said, trying to break the tense moment that I didn't know how to interpret. As we went up the stairs, Tyler carrying his luggage, he commented on the changes in the house. A few pictures Sarah had taken off the walls during an angry outburst, a stain on the wall where she had thrown a glass of wine, small signs of deterioration that I had stopped noticing because they were so integrated into my daily life. Tyler's room was exactly as he had left it 2 years ago. Rock band posters, a shelf full of technical books and science fiction novels, a desk where he used to spend hours doing homework. But now, with his transformed physical presence, the space seemed too small to contain him. Nothing's changed, he observed, placing the suitcase on the bed. Your mother didn't want me to touch anything, said it was your space. Tyler nodded, but I could see he was processing more than just the preservation of his room. He was calculating the implications of everything he had seen and heard since he arrived. Marcus, he said, turning to face me, thanks for taking care of her. I know it can't be easy. Again, I felt that strange sensation in my chest. Gratitude, recognition, but also something that made me uneasy. The way he looked at me, the sincerity in his voice, the maturity of his words, all of it contrasted sharply with the memory I had of the teenager who used to live in this house. She's family, I replied, although the word family had lost much of its meaning in recent years. Your family too, Tyler said, and something in the way he said it made my stomach clench slightly. I left him to settle in and went downstairs to check on Sarah, who was still sleeping soundly. I made a simple sandwich and a cup of coffee for Tyler, a habit of hospitality I maintained even though I hadn't had visitors in months. When he came down for dinner, he had changed his clothes. Now he was wearing a tank top that further accentuated his developed muscles and workout shorts. We sat at the kitchen table. The The dining room table was covered with unopened mail and empty bottles that Sarah had left there. "Tell me about college," I said, trying to keep the conversation in safe territory. Tyler talked about his courses, interesting projects, a few professors he admired. But I noticed he maintained direct eye contact with me while he spoke, something he didn't do when he was younger. There was an intensity to his attention that made me slightly nervous. "And you? Still doing woodworking projects?" he asked. "A few small projects. Nothing too elaborate." I showed him the picture frame I was sanding earlier. Helps keep the hands busy. Tyler took the piece and examined it carefully, running his fingers over the edges I had carved. "Your work has always been impeccable. I remember when you taught me how to use the lathe. You were a good student, patient, careful. You were a good teacher." He handed the picture frame back to me, but in the process, our fingers touched briefly. It was a completely casual touch, but I felt a little electric shock that made me pull my hand back more quickly than was natural. If Tyler noticed my reaction, he didn't show it. We talked for another hour about various topics: his plans to find a job, some repairs the house needed, memories of projects we had done together before he left for college. But throughout the conversation, I had this strange feeling that there were subtexts I wasn't managing to decipher. When Sarah woke up briefly around 10 at night, Tyler tried to talk to her. She recognized him but was clearly confused about dates and circumstances. She thought he was just visiting for a weekend, and when he tried to explain that he would be staying for the whole summer, she had trouble processing the information. "My boy is home," she slurred, trying to hug him but losing her balance. Tyler held her gently and helped her sit down again. "Yeah, Mom, I'm home." I watched the interaction between them and felt a mix of sadness and something I couldn't name. Tyler showed impressive patience and emotional maturity, treating Sarah with affection, but without any illusions about her condition. When she fell back asleep 15 minutes later, he simply covered her with a blanket and adjusted her position to make her more comfortable. "Does she usually sleep the whole night there?" he asked. "Most of the time. Sometimes she wakes up in the middle of the night and goes to the bedroom, but she usually stays on the couch." Tyler nodded, processing this information. "It must be hard for you to have a normal life with her like this." The observation caught me off guard with its frankness. I'm not sure what a normal life would be at this point. "When was the last time you went out to have some fun or had a meaningful conversation with someone?" The questions were too direct, too intimate for a conversation between a stepfather and stepson. But at the same time, I felt a desperate need for honesty. "I don't remember," I admitted. Tyler looked at me for a long moment, and again I felt that sensation of being truly seen by someone. "That's not fair to you," he finally said. "Life isn't always fair." "No, but that doesn't mean we should passively accept situations that destroy us." There was a wisdom in his words that contrasted with his age, but also an intensity that made me question if we were still talking only about my situation with Sarah. We went to our rooms around 11:30, but as I lay in bed, listening to the nightly sounds of the house, the occasional snore from Sarah, the familiar creak of the pipes, the hum of the air conditioner, I realized there was a new element in the domestic symphony. I could hear Tyler moving around in the next room, and for some reason, his physical presence in the house completely changed the atmosphere. For the first time in months, I didn't fall asleep immediately. I stared at the ceiling, processing the conversation we'd had, the way he looked at me, the questions he had asked. There was something different about him, something beyond the obvious physical transformation, a confidence, an intensity, a way of seeing me that no one else had shown in a very long time. And that realization left me simultaneously excited and deeply unsettled. The following days established a pattern I hadn't expected. Tyler would wake up early, almost at the same time as me, and we'd go down to the kitchen together. While I made coffee, he would take charge of checking on Sarah and tidying up the living room, collecting the empty bottles from the night before without making any judgmental comments. There was something comforting about sharing these morning tasks with someone, even if it was in silence. On the third day of his stay, Tyler offered to help me with some repairs I'd been putting off. The back fence had several loose boards, and I had bought new wood weeks ago but lacked the motivation to start the project alone. With Tyler there, the job seemed less daunting. We worked well together. His physical strength complemented my technical experience, and I discovered he had learned a lot about construction during some summer jobs in college. When I held a board in place, he would screw it in with precision. When he lifted heavy sections of the fence, I would adjust the alignment. Our bodies moved in sync, as if we had rehearsed this choreography. It was during one of these moments, when we were adjusting a particularly stubborn section of the fence, that I first felt something that left me genuinely disturbed. Tyler was behind me, his hands covering mine on the drill's handle, helping to maintain the right pressure. I felt the warmth of his chest against my back, his breath on my neck. For a second that seemed like an eternity. My body reacted in a way it hadn't in years. "Got it?" he asked, his low voice close to my ear. "Got it," I replied, pulling away as soon as the screw was set, pretending I needed to check other sections of the fence to hide my flushed face. If Tyler noticed my reaction, he didn't comment. But I noticed he smiled slightly as he organized the tools. During meals, our conversations gradually deepened. Tyler asked questions about my career before the accident, about the engineering projects I had led, about the technical challenges that interested me most. It was comforting to talk about these memories with someone who understood the technical language and showed genuine interest. But he also asked more personal questions. About my relationship with Sarah before the alcoholism, about how I felt being retired so young, about my plans for the future. These were questions no one else had asked, and I found myself being more honest with Tyler than I had been with anyone in years. "Have you ever thought about going back to work?" he asked one afternoon, as we were organizing tools in the garage after fixing the side gate. "My leg doesn't allow for field work, and I can't see myself in an office designing projects for others to execute. But you could teach, or do freelance consulting." The suggestion surprised me because it was something I had vaguely considered, but never verbalized. "I don't know if I still have the energy to start over." Tyler stopped what he was doing and turned to face me completely. "Marcus, you're 42. It's not too late for anything." The intensity of his gaze made me swallow hard. There was something in the way he spoke to me, a mix of respect and something else I couldn't clearly identify. "Sometimes I feel like my useful life is over," I admitted, surprising myself with my own honesty. Tyler moved closer to me, too close for a casual chat between a stepfather and stepson. "Your useful life? Marcus, you're one of the most competent and intelligent men I know. The fact that you're taking care of my mother in an impossible situation doesn't make you any less valuable." I felt my heart speed up slightly. Not just because of the words, but because of the physical proximity. The smell of his skin warmed by the work, the way his eyes didn't stray from mine. "Thanks," I mumbled, but my voice came out hoarser than I intended. "You don't have to thank me for hearing the truth." Just then, Sarah yelled something incomprehensible from the living room, breaking the moment. We quickly moved apart, as if we'd been caught doing something inappropriate, even though technically we hadn't done anything but talk. But the feeling that there were subtexts in our interactions intensified in the following days. Tyler started finding excuses for physical touches, a hand on my shoulder when he passed behind me in the kitchen, fingers that lingered when he handed me tools, goodnight hugs that lasted a few seconds longer than would be strictly appropriate. I told myself I was imagining things. Tyler had always been affectionate, even as a teenager, and I was clearly starved for human attention after months of social isolation. It was natural for me to misinterpret innocent gestures, but there were moments when the tension in the air was almost palpable. One particularly hot night in July, the house's air conditioning finally gave up. Tyler came down to the kitchen wearing only workout shorts, looking for cold water in the fridge. I was cleaning the counter after dinner when he appeared, beads of sweat glistening on his defined chest and abdomen. The heat had left his hair slightly damp, and when he bent down to grab the water bottle from the back of the fridge, the muscles in his back contracted in a way that made me completely stop what I was doing. "It's hell up there," he commented, drinking water straight from the bottle. "I'll call the AC technician first thing in the morning," I replied, trying to keep my voice normal as I watched a drop of condensation from the bottle trickle down his chin and neck. Tyler came over to the sink where I was standing, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "You should cool off too. You're sweating." Only then did I realize that I was indeed sweating, but I wasn't sure if it was because of the heat or his proximity. Tyler reached out and, to my complete surprise, ran his thumb across my forehead, wiping away a drop of sweat. "Better," he said, but his hand remained near my face, his fingers now lightly tracing a line along my jaw. My whole body tensed. That was definitely not an innocent gesture. There was a clear intention in the touch, an intimacy that transcended any normal family relationship. Our eyes met, and I saw something in Tyler's gaze that confirmed my suspicions. He was looking at me not as a stepson looks at a stepfather, but as one man looks at another when there's attraction. "Tyler," I began, my voice coming out as a whisper. "Yeah?" he replied, his own voice low and charged with a tension I could no longer pretend didn't exist. The moment was shattered by the sound of Sarah stirring on the living room couch, muttering something in her sleep. We pulled apart immediately, as if we'd been electrocuted. Tyler ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my gaze, while I turned back to the sink, pretending I had something urgent to wash. I'm going to try to sleep," he said, his voice now strange and formal. "Good night," I replied, still with my back to him. I heard his footsteps going up the stairs, but I stayed in the kitchen for another 15 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. I could no longer deny that there was a sexual tension between us. Tyler was clearly interested in me in a way that went far beyond appropriate, and what scared me the most was that I was starting to return that interest. I went up to my room, still disturbed by the interaction. I lay in bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I could hear Tyler moving around in the room next door, and I wondered if he was as restless as I was. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I thought it was Sarah going to the bathroom, but the footsteps stopped in front of my door. He stood there for a few minutes. I was barely breathing, wondering if Tyler was considering coming in. Finally, I heard the footsteps move away, but it took another hour before I could fall asleep. The next morning was awkward. Tyler avoided direct eye contact during breakfast, and our interactions were formal and limited to the strictly necessary. I thought that maybe he'd regretted the previous night's advance and that things would go back to normal. But during lunch, as we were working together to fix a shelf in the pantry, the tension returned. We were in a small space, forced to be close while handling the tools. Every time we accidentally brushed against each other, I felt a jolt of electricity. Tyler was no longer avoiding my gaze, on the contrary. He seemed to be studying me intensely. "Marcus," he said suddenly, dropping the screwdriver he was using. "What? Have you ever thought about how different it would be if—" He hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. If things were different here? The question was deliberately vague, but the context and tone made it clear he wasn't just talking about the situation with Sarah. "Different how?" I asked, although part of me didn't want to hear the answer. Tyler moved closer, so close I could count the small scars on his tattooed arm. "You know how." My heart started beating faster. "Tyler, we can't." "Why not?" "Because you're my stepson. Because you're 21. Because this would be wrong on so many levels I don't even know where to begin." "Wrong according to who?" he asked, placing a hand on the wall behind me, gently cornering me. "We're not related by blood. You married my mom when I was almost an adult. And I'm definitely not a kid anymore." His proximity was making me dizzy. I could feel the heat of his body, the scent of his shampoo mixed with his natural masculine aroma. "But Sarah, my mom is too drunk to realize what day of the week it is. And even if she wasn't, that wouldn't change what I feel." "What do you feel?" I asked, my voice coming out as a whisper. Tyler hesitated for a moment, as if making an irreversible decision. "I feel like you're the most interesting and attractive man I've ever met. I feel like I've wanted to kiss you since I got here. I feel like I can't stop thinking about what it would be like to be with you." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. There was no more ambiguity, no more room for denial. Tyler was confessing his attraction to me clearly and directly. "Tyler, this is crazy," I muttered, but my body was betraying my words. I felt myself leaning slightly towards him, drawn in by his closeness. "Is it crazy?" he asked, his free hand moving to touch my face. "Or is it the first real thing that's happened in this house in years?" Before I could answer, we heard Sarah's voice shouting my name from the living room. We separated quickly, our hearts pounding. Tyler ran his hands through his hair, clearly frustrated by the interruption. "She probably just wants more booze," he said, but his voice was tense. "I'll go see what she needs," I replied, leaving the pantry at a brisk pace. Sarah was awake, but confused about where she had left her bottle of vodka. I helped her up and walked her to the kitchen, where she grabbed a new bottle from the cabinet. The whole time I felt Tyler watching me from the corner of the kitchen, his presence a constant distraction. "My boy's home," Sarah murmured, noticing Tyler. "Good to see you two are getting along." If she knew how well we were getting along, she certainly wouldn't be happy. But she went back to the sofa without suspecting a thing, leaving Tyler and me alone again in the kitchen. "We need to talk about this properly," Tyler said as soon as Sarah was settled. "There's nothing to talk about. This can't happen." "Yes, it can, and it will." There was a determination in his voice that made me swallow hard. "The question is when, not if." Before I could reply, Tyler left the kitchen, leaving me alone with my confused thoughts and my still racing heart. That night, I could barely eat dinner. Tyler was acting normal on the surface, talking about casual things, but I could feel the underlying tension in every word, every glance. It was like we were playing a role for an audience of one Sarah, while a completely different conversation was happening silently between us. I went to bed earlier than usual, claiming I was tired, but I really needed space to process everything that had happened. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how I had gotten to this point. Tyler was right about several things. We weren't blood relatives. He was an adult. My marriage to Sarah had been over for years, and if I were completely honest with myself, I was attracted to him too. But was it right? Was it ethical? Was it emotionally safe for either of us? Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hall again. This time, they didn't stop in front of my door, they continued to the bathroom. I heard the tap run, then the footsteps coming back, but when they passed my door a second time, they stopped. I lay motionless, barely breathing. After a few minutes that felt like hours, I heard a soft knock on the door. "Marcus," Tyler whispered. "Are you awake?" My heart hammered. I could pretend to be asleep. I could ignore him until he gave up and went back to his room. I could keep the door closed and preserve the illusion that none of this was happening. Instead, I got up and opened the door. Tyler was standing in the hallway, wearing only sleep shorts, his silhouette lit by the dim light coming from the bathroom. His eyes studied me for a moment before he spoke. "I can't sleep," he said simply. "Me neither. Can I come in? Just to talk." I knew it was a bad idea. I knew I was crossing a line I might not be able to come back from. But I stepped away from the door, letting him in. Tyler closed the door behind him and stood near it, as if he were nervous about getting closer. The moonlight coming through the window cast soft shadows on his face, accentuating the strong line of his jaw and the intensity of his eyes. "About earlier," he began. "Tyler, this can't happen," I interrupted, but my voice lacked the conviction I wanted it to have. "Why do you keep saying that when your body is telling me the opposite?" He was right. I was tense, my heart was racing, and there was a part of me that desperately wanted to close the distance between us. Because I have to be the responsible adult here. "I'm an adult too, Marcus, and I know exactly what I want." Tyler started to approach slowly, as if he were approaching a frightened animal. Every step he took towards me made my resolve weaken a little more. "What do you want?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You," he said, now close enough for me to feel the warmth of his skin. "I want you, Marcus. I want to know what it's like to kiss you. I want to know what it's like to be touched by you. I want to stop pretending this is just a fantasy." His words made something inside me break. All the resistance I had built up, all the logical reasons why this was a bad idea, vanished in a moment of pure need. Tyler reached out and touched my face, just as he had in the kitchen. But this time I didn't pull away. His fingers traced the line of my jaw, moved down my neck, and I felt my entire body react to his touch. "Marcus," he whispered, my name leaving his lips like a prayer. "Tyler, if we do this, it'll change everything, I know." He moved even closer, our bodies almost touching. But pretending it's not happening is also changing everything. He was right. The tension between us was affecting every interaction, every moment we spent in the same house. We couldn't go back to what we were before. Tyler placed his hands on my shoulders, his thumbs tracing small circles on my skin through my t-shirt. "You want this as much as I do. I can see it in your eyes." "Yes," I finally admitted, my voice barely audible. "I do." That was all Tyler needed to hear. He leaned in and kissed me, soft at first, almost hesitant, as if he still expected me to push him away. But when I responded to the kiss, when my hands moved to his waist and pulled him closer, the hesitation disappeared. The kiss deepened, became more urgent. Tyler tasted of toothpaste and something that was uniquely him. His hands moved to my face, holding me as if I were something precious he was afraid of losing. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing heavily. Tyler rested his forehead on mine, our eyes meeting in the dimness of the room. "There's no going back after this," I murmured. "I don't want to go back," he answered. "I want to move forward. With you." Tyler gently guided me towards the bed, his hands never completely leaving my body. We sat on the edge, looking into each other's eyes for a moment that seemed suspended in time. "Are you sure?" I asked one last time. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," he replied, kissing me again. This time, the kiss was different, more confident, more exploratory. Tyler carefully laid me down on the bed, his body partially covering mine. I felt his weight, the solidity of his muscles, the warmth of his skin through our minimal clothing. His hands began to explore my body with a reverence that surprised me. There was no rush, no desperation, just a careful exploration and genuine admiration. When he removed my t-shirt, his fingers traced every line, every scar, as if he were memorizing my body. "You're beautiful," he murmured against my skin. kissing a trail from my neck to my chest. No one had called me beautiful in years. Sarah used to make comments about my body before the accident, but after that, physical intimacy between us had practically vanished. Hearing those words from Tyler, feeling the genuine desire in his touch, was awakening parts of me I had buried so long ago I'd forgotten they existed. My own hands began to explore his body first, hesitantly, then with more confidence. Tyler was a work of art sculpted from flesh and muscle. Every curve, every line was perfect, from the defined muscles of his abdomen to the strength of his shoulders. When I ran my fingers over his tattoos, he moaned softly, the sound sending waves of desire through my body. "Have you ever been with a man before?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "No," he admitted, his eyes meeting mine. "You're the first." But I knew. I always knew I was different. I just didn't know it was you I was waiting for. His words hit me deeply. This wasn't just physical attraction. There was something emotional happening here. A connection that transcended the physical. "I'll take care of you," I promised, reversing our positions so he was underneath me. "I'll teach you everything." Tyler smiled, a mixture of nervousness and excitement in his eyes. "I trust you." What happened next was a slow, careful exploration of bodies, sensations, and boundaries. I guided Tyler through each new experience, teaching him with patience and affection. He was an eager student, responding to my touch with an intensity that surprised me. When we finally came together completely, we were both lost in sensations that seemed to redraw our understanding of pleasure and connection. Tyler moved with me as if we had rehearsed this intimate dance for years, our bodies finding a rhythm that was uniquely ours. The climax, when it came, was overwhelming for both of us. Tyler cried out my name, his nails digging into my back, while I lost myself completely in the intensity of the moment. It was more than physical, it was an emotional fusion that left me trembling and vulnerable. We held each other afterward, our bodies still intertwined, our breathing gradually returning to normal. Tyler traced lazy circles on my chest, his head resting on my shoulder. "That was—" he started, but couldn't finish the sentence. "I know," I murmured, kissing the top of his head. "Marcus? Yeah? I love you." The words hung in the air between us. They weren't words I expected to hear, especially not so soon. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw he was completely serious. "Tyler, you don't have to say it back. I know it's complicated. I just needed you to know." But the truth was, I was starting to feel something similar. What had started as physical attraction had turned into something much deeper during that night. "Me too," I finally admitted. "I don't know how or when it happened, but I feel something strong for you too." Tyler smiled, a radiant smile that lit up his entire face. We kissed again, more gently this time, like a promise that this was just the beginning. But even in that moment of perfect intimacy, a part of my mind was already worrying about what would come next. How were we going to deal with Sarah? With society? With our own families? How were we going to build something real and lasting in such a complicated situation? For now, though, those worries seemed distant and irrelevant. For now, there was only Tyler and me, tangled in the darkness of my room, discovering a connection that neither of us had foreseen, but that we both knew had changed our lives forever. The next morning brought a reality that neither of us was prepared to face. I woke up with Tyler still in my arms, his soft breath against my chest, his hair messed up from the night we had shared. For a moment, I allowed myself to savor the weight of his body against mine, the scent of his skin, the perfect naturalness of having him there. But then the awareness of our situation began to seep in like cold light through the curtains. Sarah was in the living room, as always, but this time there was something different about her snoring. It sounded more irregular, deeper. Tyler woke up a few minutes after me, his green eyes immediately meeting mine with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. "Good morning," he whispered, his voice hoarse from sleep and the previous night's activities. "Good morning," I replied, but my voice carried a tension that he picked up on immediately. "Are you regretting it?" he asked, propping himself up slightly to study me better. "Not what we did," I answered honestly, "but I'm worried about what it means." Tyler nodded, understanding. "Me too, but I don't regret it one bit." We got up in silence, each of us dressing with a sharp awareness of the other's presence. There was a new intimacy between us, the way Tyler passed me my shirt, how our fingers touched when he handed me my clothes, how our gazes met with an intensity charged with shared meaning. We went down to the kitchen together, but kept a careful distance. Sarah was awake, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee that looked more like an excuse to add vodka to her morning. She greeted us with a distracted wave, clearly suspecting nothing. "You two are up early," she commented, her voice slurred. "We had some projects to finish," Tyler replied smoothly, and I admired his ability to keep his voice normal. During breakfast, we tried to maintain a semblance of normality, but there was a constant electric current between us. Every time our eyes met, I felt the intensity of the previous night all over again. When Tyler reached for the sugar and his fingers brushed against mine, my heart sped up, as if I were a teenager experiencing attraction for the first time. Sarah finished her coffee and went back to the living room sofa, leaving us alone in the kitchen. Tyler approached me immediately. "Marcus," he said, placing his hands on my shoulders. "About last night." "We can't do that again," I interrupted, though my body was protesting the words. "Not with your mom in the house." "So what do we do?" he asked, his frustration evident. "Pretend it didn't happen?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I need to think." But thinking was proving impossible with Tyler so close. His scent, his presence, the vivid memory of what it was like to be with him, it all conspired against any attempt at rationality. The following days were exquisite torture. Tyler and I maintained a facade of normality during the day, but the sexual tension between us was almost palpable. Every accidental touch, every prolonged glance, every moment we were alone became charged with unexplored possibilities. At night, I would lie in bed, listening to Tyler move in the room next door, knowing he was just as restless as I was. Several times I heard footsteps in the hallway, stopping in front of my door, but he never knocked again. And I never had enough courage to open the door and invite him in. During the day, we worked together on household projects, but every task became an opportunity for stolen moments of intimacy. Tyler would find excuses to be close to me, to touch me in ways that seemed casual to any outside observer, but that sent waves of desire through my body. One afternoon, while we were fixing a shelf in the pantry, Tyler cornered me against the wall. "I can't take this anymore," he whispered, his face inches from mine. "I feel like I'm going crazy." "Tyler, we can't. Your mom's asleep," he interrupted. "She's always asleep, and I need you." Before I could protest, he kissed me. It was a desperate kiss, loaded with all the accumulated tension of the past few days. I responded automatically, my body betraying my rational mind. His hands moved to my waist, pressing me against the wall, and for a moment I lost myself completely in the sensation. The sound of Sarah stirring in the living room made us break apart abruptly, both of us breathing heavily. Tyler rested his forehead on mine, his eyes closed in frustration. "This can't go on like this," he murmured. "I know," I replied, "but I don't know what to do." It was that night that Tyler made a decision that would change everything. He came down to the kitchen around 2 in the morning, when Sarah was in her deepest, alcohol-induced sleep. I was sitting at the table, unable to sleep, looking out the window at the moonlit garden. "Marcus," he said, his voice determined in a way I hadn't heard before. I turned to look at him. He was wearing only shorts, his muscles defined by the shadows created by the low light of the kitchen. But there was something different in his posture, a resolution that immediately put me on alert. "I need to tell you something," he continued, approaching the table. "I'm going back to college." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What? When?" "Tomorrow. I got a research assistant job that starts on Monday. I need to be there for training." "But you said you were staying all summer." Tyler pulled out a chair and sat in front of me, his eyes never leaving mine. "I can't stay, Marcus. Not like this. Not pretending we're just a stepfather and stepson when we know we're so much more than that." "Tyler, let me finish," he interrupted. "I'm in love with you. Completely, irrevocably in love. And I know you feel something for me too. But this situation, with my mother here, with all these complications, it's destroying us." He was right. The constant tension, the need to hide our feelings, the guilt and desire in constant conflict, all of it was creating an unbearable pressure. "I don't want you to go," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "And I don't want to go. But I have to. I need space to think, to decide what to do with these feelings. And you need it too." Tyler reached his hand across the table and took mine. "But before I go, I need to tell you a few things." "What?" "First, that what happened between us was not a mistake. It was the most real and true thing I've ever experienced in my life. Second, that I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen, or try to forget. And third, that I hope you don't try to forget either." I felt tears start to form in my eyes. The prospect of Tyler leaving, of returning to my solitary existence, was almost unbearable. How are we going to deal with this? I asked. I don't know, he admitted. But I know I can't stay here pretending we're just family, when my whole body screams for you every time you're in the same room. Tyler stood up and walked around the table, kneeling beside my chair. He placed his hands on my face, forcing me to look him in the eyes. Marcus, I love you. Not like a stepson loves a stepfather, but like one man loves another man. Completely. Without reservation. Without shame. I love you too, I confessed, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. And it scares me more than anything I've ever felt. Tyler smiled through the tears that were now glistening in his own eyes. Why does it scare you? Because it changes everything. Because it means I can no longer pretend that my life with Sarah is enough. Because it means I have to make decisions I don't know if I have the courage to make. You have courage, Tyler said with conviction. You're the bravest man I know. You took care of my mother when any normal person would have run away. You built a whole life in an impossible situation. You have more courage than you realize. We kissed there, in the dark kitchen, a kiss that tasted of both farewell and promise. When we separated, we both knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Stay with me tonight, I murmured against his lips. One last time before you go. Tyler nodded, taking me by the hand and guiding me silently back to my room. Our last night together was different from the first. There was an urgency, a need to memorize every touch, every sensation. We made love as if it were the last time we would ever see each other, as if we could somehow capture the essence of what we felt for each other and save it for the difficult days we knew were coming. When we finished, we lay intertwined, neither of us wanting to sleep and lose a single moment together. Tyler traced invisible patterns on my chest while I ran my fingers through his hair. I don't want the sun to come up, he whispered. Me neither. But it will. And I'll have to leave. And I'll have to stay. Tyler propped himself up slightly to look at me. For now. But this isn't forever, Marcus. I graduate in 2 years. You don't have to be stuck here forever. And your mother. My mother needs professional help that neither of us can give. Staying here pretending we can save her isn't helping anyone. He was right. But guilt had been a constant companion for so long that it was hard to imagine breaking free from it. The morning came. Cruel and relentless. Tyler packed his bags while Sarah was still asleep, our movements silent and efficient. There wasn't much to say that we hadn't already said during the night. When it was time to leave, we said our goodbyes in the entryway. Sarah had woken up briefly to say goodbye to her son, but she was already back on the couch when Tyler picked up his bags. Are you going to be okay? He asked, his hands holding mine. I'll survive, I replied, though I wasn't sure of it. That's not enough. I want you to live, not just survive. Tyler kissed me one last time, a soft kiss loaded with all the words we couldn't say. Then he grabbed his bags and walked to the car. I stood at the door watching him leave, feeling as if an essential part of me was being torn away. The black Honda disappeared around the corner, taking Tyler and leaving me with an emptiness that felt physical in its intensity. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. I went back to my old routine, but now it seemed even more meaningless. I took care of Sarah, maintained the house, worked on small projects in the garage. But everything had lost its shine. All the color had been drained from my existence. Tyler and I exchanged a few text messages in the first few weeks, cautious conversations about how we were adjusting to the separation. But gradually, the contact dwindled. He was busy with school and work, and I was sinking into a depression I could barely recognize. It was in November, almost 4 months after he left, that I received the message that changed everything. It was a particularly difficult night. Sarah had had an outburst earlier, yelling at me about things that made no sense, accusing me of crimes that only existed in her drunken mind. Then she had passed out on the living room floor and I had to carry her to the sofa, feeling the dead weight of her body and wondering how many more times I could do this. I was sitting in the kitchen, drinking cold coffee and contemplating the emptiness of my life, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Tyler. I still dream about you every night. Is that normal? I stared at the screen for several minutes before I could reply. My heart was beating so hard I thought Tyler could hear it across the distance. Me too, I finally typed. And I don't know if it's normal, but I know it's real. The reply came immediately. I can't stand pretending I've forgotten you. I can't stand pretending that what we felt wasn't real. I can't pretend either. Marcus, I need to see you. My heart practically stopped. When? Winter break starts in 2 weeks. I'll be there. And your mom? My mom will have to deal with reality. We both will. I looked into the living room where Sarah slept in her usual stupor. Then at the kitchen, where Tyler and I had shared so many meaningful moments, the house seemed to be waiting for his return as much as I was. "I'll be here," I replied. "I love you, Marcus. That never changed. I love you too. More than I should. More than is safe. More than I can express. Then let's stop fighting it. Let's figure out how to make it work." After the conversation ended, I sat in the kitchen for hours, looking out the window at the snow-covered garden. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope growing in my chest. Tyler was coming back. I didn't know how we were going to solve all the complications, all the moral and social issues our relationship raised. I didn't know how we were going to deal with Sarah, with our families, with the outside world that would surely not understand. But I knew that I loved Tyler with an intensity that defied all logic, and that he loved me the same way. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to build something real and lasting. As I prepared to go up to my room, I picked up my phone and sent one last message. "Tyler, when you come back, we'll find a way to be together. I don't know how, but we'll find a way." The reply came minutes later. "I was waiting for you to say that. See you in 2 weeks." And Marcus? This time, I'm not leaving again. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. I went up the stairs with a smile on my face for the first time in months. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I knew we would face it together. And that was enough to start hoping again, to start believing that my life could have meaning again. If you're intrigued by Marcus and Tyler's fate, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because Tyler's return for winter break will bring twists you won't want to miss. What you're hearing here is just the beginning. The full stories, unfiltered and with all the details you can imagine, are available now. Check the link in the description right now. Leave a comment. Do you think Marcus should fight for this connection or protect the family structure? See you in the next episode, where we'll find out how this forbidden love story will find its way through the family chaos.